conjunction with International Day of Awareness on Food Loss and Waste today, that falls today, September 29. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Muthi Kautsar. I am a journalist at the Jakarta Post. Before we start, let me inform you that we will have 5 distinguished speakers. We will start the session with a keynote speech from Bapak Anang Nugroho Setio Mulyono, National Development Planning Agency Bappenas, Director of Food and Agriculture. Unfortunately, Bapak Arifin Rudiyanto cannot join us today as he was summoned by the minister just a couple hours ago. But we thank you, Bapak Anang, for representing Bappenas in our webinar today. And also thank you to distinguished speakers who are already joining us today. We have Dr. Lawrence Haddad, Executive Director, Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. Thank you, Pa Lawrence, for being here with us today. We really appreciate it. And Ibu Dhian Dipo, Health Ministry Director of Public Health Nutrition. Hello Ibu, selamat sore. Terima kasih sudah bergabung dengan kita semua di sini.
Selamat sore.
Yeah, and then Mr. Craig Hanson from World Resources Institute Global Director. Mr. Craig Hanson is a World Resources Institute Global Director for Food, Forest, and Water. Thank you, Pak Craig, for being here with us today. We really appreciate you. We really appreciate to have you here today. And we will also have Ibu Felia Salim, Finance and Banking Expert, Food and Land Use Coalition, FOLU Ambassador, and also a GAIN board member. All the speakers will have 15 minutes to speak today, and afterwards we will move to the question and answer session. Due to the limited time that we have, we would not be able to answer all your questions during the session. So feel free to ask any question you may have throughout the webinar by using the Q&A box so that the panelists will also be able to answer the questions directly. And also, please do not hesitate to ask questions in Bahasa Indonesia. I would like to remind you that today's webinar will be conducted in English, but you can access the simultaneous interpretation provided by our team. We will have our colleagues, Hikmat Gumilar and Yosuhenda, as our interpreters today. You can hear it by clicking the Japanese channel on your Zoom interface. Penonton, jadi hari ini webinar akan disampaikan dalam bahasa Inggris, tapi ada penerjemahan yang bisa dilihat dan penerjemahan ini dilakukan oleh tim kami, Hikmat Gumilar dan Yosuhenda. Anda bisa mengklik button Japanese channel di interface Zoom. That's all. Thank you once again for participating in our webinar. And also, you can always support good journalism by subscribing today on the jakartapost.com/packages. I will share the link in the chat box as well. I hope you'll enjoy this webinar, and I will hand over to our moderator today. She is a journalist at the Jakarta Post. Please welcome Sausan Atika. Sausan, the platform is yours.
Thank you, Muthi, for your opening. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sausan, journalist at the Jakarta Post. Thank you very much for joining our webinar. Welcome, and I'll be your moderator of the day. Today, we are having a paradox where we can provide enough food for the people, but the food is not equally distributed, even lost or discarded. Around 14% of food lost before reaching our consumer, making up roughly 1/3 of foods produced worldwide, are either lost or discarded each year, according to the estimates from the Food and Agriculture Organization. In an article on the FAO website, which has a quote from one of our speakers today, Lawrence Haddad, saying that food loss and waste is a sign of food systems in distress. Not only food is being lost, but also food safety and nutrition are being lost as well. This indicates the importance to address this problem as many countries are dealing with food insecurity and malnutrition, including Indonesia. Today, we celebrate the first ever observance of the International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste, which unexpectedly happens during the COVID-19 pandemic. During these times, the risk of food loss and waste is escalating for a number of reasons, including disruption in supply chains and quarantine measures. So reducing food loss and waste becomes more relevant than ever in a world where at least 83 million more people estimate to suffer from hunger this year as a result of the economic contraction triggered by the COVID-19, according to the UN. Therefore, I believe that today's topic will be a very important discussion for all of us as we are facing a critical time in alleviating malnutrition. But I think not only that, because by having a more sustainable food system, it will also benefit the environment. So for today's webinar, we will discuss about the importance to increase awareness on food loss and waste, what can be done to reduce food loss and waste in Indonesia, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, lessons learned and best practices from other countries, and we hope this opportunity will encourage collaborative measures in addressing this issue at various stakeholders level. We are so honored today because we have 5 wonderful speakers here will share their insight with us. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your time. We at the Jakarta Post really appreciate it. So without further ado, I think we will go to the first speaker. We have Lawrence here. Hi, Lawrence, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you, Sausan?
I think it's 8 in the morning, right?
Yes, not too early, it's fine.
I hope you have your coffee already.
I have my coffee, thank you.
So Lawrence Haddad is the Executive Director of Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, or GAIN. He has spent years dedicating himself on food insecurity and malnutrition issues. He was awarded World Food Prize in 2018. It's an honor to have you here with us. So you have 10 minutes for the presentation, and I expect you will share your thoughts about food loss and waste from the global perspective, and especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I believe you'll also share about initiatives that GAIN has conducted related to this issue. I think there is one ongoing project in Indonesia also, right? So now, do you already have your presentation?
I have some slides, I'll share them, Sausan, but first of all, I wanted to thank you and the Jakarta Post for your leadership in this area. You know, malnutrition, environmental degradation, these are, and related to food loss and food waste, these are issues that are silent crises, and we rely on champions like the Jakarta Post with your voice and your reach to champion these issues. So we salute you, all of us, for your leadership. Thank you. I'd like to thank the Post for organizing this session, and I'd like to say good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to everybody on the call. Let me share a few slides with you.
Yes, please. You have 10 minutes, and later we will have a discussion.
Yeah,
Thank you, Lawrence.
I will try to be disciplined. So the title of my presentation is Food Loss is Nutrition Loss is Environmental Loss, and why it matters for Indonesia and GAIN's work to reduce it. And I can't seem to click. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Let me try again. Yeah. Oh, okay. So the first thing to notice here is that food loss is nutrition loss. And why do I say that? Well, this is the Indonesian food pyramid, dietary guideline food pyramid, and most of the foods in the middle 2 layers, they're very high in nutrients, high in vitamins, minerals, high quality proteins. These are all things that are really important for the body's development and the brain's development. And most of these foods are highly perishable. So if they perish, if there's waste, if there's loss, then these nutrients are lost from the system. But also, very importantly, all the environmental inputs that went into producing those foods are also lost. And here you can see each one of these 5 columns are things we really care about in the environmental world. And you can see the red bars. You can see how important food, agriculture, and livestock are to each of these. So if we get the choices wrong within the red bars, we exacerbate these environmental consequences. Now, food loss and food waste is different in different regions. There's two types. We often put food loss and food waste together, but they're really quite different. Food waste happens mostly at the consumer side of things, people throwing away food that has gone rotten in their refrigerator, or restaurants throwing away excess food. That's the red in these bars. The blue in the bars is the loss that happens between at harvest, pre-harvest, and then from harvest all the way to retailing. And you can see for South and Southeast Asia, as you can see for most of Sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America, most of the loss is in the production to retailing side of things. And if we're going to look at fish, because fish is the example I want to use today, if we're going to look at fish that's lost or wasted in different regions, you can see here that over 30% of the fish that is harvested is lost or wasted in South and Southeast Asia. And most of it happens in the distribution phase, and a lot happens in the processing phase and post-catch. If you look at industrialized Asia, on the left-hand side, a much bigger proportion of the loss happens actually during the fishing process itself. But in South and Southeast Asia, more of it is after the fishing process. Now, this really matters. It's a waste of nutrients. It's a waste of environmental inputs. From a nutrition perspective, because I know Craig and others will talk more about the environmental aspects. From a nutrition perspective, the food systems dashboard, and the URL for that is at the top right-hand corner of your screen. The food systems dashboard can really help shine a light on some of the issues that are relevant for Indonesia. So Indonesia is one of the few countries in Asia to have a double burden of malnutrition. This means it has a high level of undernutrition, kids that are stunted, kids that are too thin for their height, really sort of conditions of deprivation, not enough food. But they also have a very high, in Indonesia, there's also a very high level of overweight, people eating too much of the wrong kinds of foods that lead to body fat being put on. And that's the light orange color here. And you can see most of the rest of Asia is the darker orange color, which means they do not have the double burden. And in fact, Indonesia is very similar to Sub-Saharan Africa in this regard. It hasn't yet dealt with undernutrition, and it's having to cope with a new problem of overnutrition. So still using the food systems dashboard data, it's very clear that Indonesian people have a much higher probability of dying from diet-related heart disease and cancers than people in Thailand. And you can see from the data here, 26% of adults in Indonesia are likely to die from diet-related heart diseases and cancer. And in Thailand, that percentage is only 15%. Remember, Indonesia is 26%, Thailand's 15%. So what's going on? Well, we know that fish is a really good way to lower diet-related chronic disease risks, as well as reducing undernutrition. Fish has a fantastic nutrient profile with vitamins, micronutrients, essential fatty acids. And these are good for any kind of malnutrition. And Indonesia, it's promising, you know, Indonesia has high levels of fish supplies compared to Thailand. 122 is the index for Indonesia, and it's 80 for Thailand. So again, Indonesia, much higher level, almost 50% higher than Thailand in terms of fish supplies. But when we look at the price of fish relative to cereals, this is much higher in Indonesia than in Thailand. So again, the relative price of fish to cereals in Indonesia is 5, and in Thailand, it's only 3.2. So again, compared to Indonesia, the Indonesia level is 80% higher, the price of fish relative to cereal in Indonesia than it is in Thailand. And this is a problem because this really hurts fish consumption the higher the price. And it's not helped because there's so much fish loss along the value chain. So this also drives the price up. So the loss of fish along the value chain drives the price up, means that fish is less available, and it means that nutrients are lost and environmental outputs are not attained because a lot of environmental inputs are lost. So what to do about it? Well, there are lots of things to do about it, and we'll hear about many of them today. GAIN's work is called, in Indonesia, on food loss and food waste, is called IPLAN, and that's the Indonesia Post-Harvest Loss Alliance for Nutrition. And the aim here is to improve the availability of good quality, nutritious and affordable, sustainable fresh fish through reducing post-harvest losses. And there are three broad strands to this work. And in fact, most of GAIN's work brings together these three kinds of strands. First of all, we need to strengthen the enabling environment. That means raising the profile of the issue in policy circles. It means events like this with the esteemed Jakarta Post. It means establishing an alliance of actors and stakeholders from the public and private sector throughout Indonesia that care about this issue and can do something about it. It means getting better assessments for what's the losses of different types of fish in different parts of the country. That's really important for advocacy. If we don't know what the loss is, we can't advocate for it and we can't do anything about it. And we focus relentlessly on SDG 12. We also do a lot of work around increasing access to sustainable fish and reducing food loss in the fish value chains. And for there, we rely a lot on businesses. Small and medium enterprises are the enterprises that most people from low income and middle income settings, they rely on small and medium enterprises. And so we spend a lot of time providing technical assistance, mentoring, and cash prizes for investments in the business, small businesses that have the best ideas for innovation in cold chain and for using fish that would otherwise be discarded. We do a lot of training and mentoring as well to the winners of these innovation challenges. And then finally, we create demand. We do a lot of work around education through training and mentoring. We do a lot of innovation work, and we develop really accessible communication materials. And here we have the enabling environment, the demand side work, and the access work. So the access work is a lot of innovation. We work with the Innovation Factory, which is a highly regarded partner in Indonesia. We do a lot of demand side work and a lot of enabling environment work. This is my penultimate slide, colleagues, because time is tight, but this is an example of the Business Innovation Challenge that we run. We've run several rounds of these. These are some of the winners that you see before you. And it's really a competition to surface inventors and innovators to see who's doing what in this space. How can we make this food loss and food waste a commercial opportunity to drive business growth as well as reduce food loss and food waste to improve nutrition and environment outcomes. So we spend a lot of time in these challenges, which are essentially competitions. We surface innovators and technical folks, and we support them with mentors and team training. We go through an 8-week training and coaching program with them, essentially to derive commercialization pathways. How can we help them incubate and accelerate their innovations and take them to the market? So this involves a lot of market validation research, technology development, like the nuts and bolts of licensing and permitting, and then business development and improvement. And some of the early winners are listed here for you. We've generated over 577 innovative proposals on appropriate local cold chain technology and food design. And food design is ready to eat, ready to cook fish-based foods made from fish that would otherwise be discarded. And some of the finalist products are available in the market. So this is GAIN's contribution. It's about raising the awareness of the importance of the issue. It's about helping measure the nature of the problem. It's about raising consumer awareness, and it's about stimulating the private sector to meet this really important food loss, nutrition loss, environmental loss challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Thank you very much for sharing with us about GAIN initiatives, especially in Indonesia. I think you have addressed it at the very earlier of your presentation. I also believe that you are aware that some reports saying that Indonesia is among top countries as a food waste contributor. And does this indicate awareness and knowledge of the importance of this issue rather low in Indonesia? And I actually read your blog, an article posted last year. I don't know if you still have the same concern about this, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. How do we raise awareness? How do we build the sense of urgency on this topic?
I think it's events like this really help, you know, and we need champions, high-level champions from all walks of life, from government, from business, from the celebrity chefs. That all of these folks are important. But I think the way you really reduce the problem is to create a business opportunity out of it. If you can create a business opportunity, it's a very strong incentive for businesses to not waste so much of the foods and the products that they've spent so long trying to grow and to harvest and to capture. It's a very strong business incentive for them to do that. So we have to help businesses to do this. Public sector has a very important role to play in terms of infrastructure, and because Indonesia has so many different islands and is such a vast country, infrastructure is always going to be a challenge. But the Indonesian business community is so vibrant and so thriving. We need some low-cost cold chain technology solutions to help overcome some of the spatial and infrastructure challenges that the country faces.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you very much, Lawrence. Unfortunately, the time is up. We actually want to hear from you more about this. I think we will have a discussion later in the Q&A session. And we have to move to the next speaker. Now we have Bu Dhian, right? Yes. From the Health Ministry. So Lawrence has spoken more about some initiatives and his thoughts about how we can increase awareness. And his background is very strong in the food insecurity and malnutrition. And now we have the time to discuss about the nutrition in Indonesia, the malnutrition status in Indonesia. And we have here Bu Dhian Dipo, Director of Public Health Nutrition of Health Ministry. Bu Dhian assumed the position last year, but she has served the institution covering nutritional problems for years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
In this session, Bu Dhian will elaborate more about the Health Ministry's findings on malnutrition of Indonesian children and pregnant women. And in Indonesia's case, Bu Dhian, how is the reduction of food loss and waste can contribute to solve the malnutrition issues? You also have 10 minutes for your presentation. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sausan. Good afternoon, all. Hope you all is fine and healthy in this situation. So thank you. I would like to thanks to Jakarta Post and GAIN for arranging this conference to discuss food loss and food waste during COVID-19. Actually, I will before. So Sausan has also tell us about this, and now I want to describe more detail after Pak Lawrence also already discussed about this. Next, the current situation in Indonesia. Before Pak Lawrence said that we have a double burden, but actually we have a triple burden. Undernutrition, overweight, and also micronutrient problems. This is what the stunting still high because of the micronutrient deficiency is very high also. By now, stunting prevalence is achieved by 27.7% decrease from the year previous, However, is still in categorical of community health problem with large regional disparities according to the basic survey data. So the prevalence of maternal anemia and adult obesity increased between 2013 and 2018. The condition is shown by half of pregnant women suffering from anemia. At the same time, now communicable, non-communicable disease that related with poor metabolic health, such as obesity, diabetic, is increased. So this is our triple burden. Next. As we know, good nutrition is an essential individual defense against COVID-19. Even the total energy intake quality of Indonesian has been elevating from the data about Bappenas actually. Unfortunately, food consumption pattern in Indonesia is not balanced. So we have to do more about this. And actually, this morning we have already discussed about the fish. Pak Lawrence tell more about fish. We have already discussed this morning with the some pakar and Ministry of Fishery and also gave also GP2GI. We talk about fish. More slide next. This is the impact of COVID-19 to stunting. National Institute of Health Research and Development has already do research about this, and the pandemic has disrupted many aspects of daily life, purchasing power, financial, food security, especially for a vulnerable and poor household. It's food emergency actually. Forward, this condition will degrade nutrient intake and long-lasting nutrition problem in life cycle. This is a study conducted by National Institute Health Research and Development, so that during pandemic condition, food consumption among online driver in Indonesia has changed. Daily intake of protein reduced. So next slide. This is the survey was identified that pandemic has been impacted individual and community health and nutrition services at Puskesmas and district health services. We realize so strengthen the health system response for nutritional care is to ensure the continuity of nutritional services, particularly in early detection and community-based management, is important. This is in this slide show that most the Puskesmas reduce patient visit. There are 83.67, 0.6 before. Okay. The 0.6, most the Puskesmas reduce patient visits. And when we see this slide also that nearly half of Puskesmas have eliminated posyandu services, 43.57. So this is impact of the pandemic for the community. So government of Indonesia realized that investing the Indonesian people will ensure that our country continues to prosper. One of the key investment is good nutrition. Stunting prevention and reduction through multiple intervention and multi-sectoral approach. Therefore, the government of Indonesia assigned stunting as a priority in 2020 to 2024 as a medium-term national development plan. The stunting reduction target is on 2024 is 14%. 14%. It means Indonesia should work harder to realize it. Reducing 3% per year and do convergent approach is certainly an area. So it's hard hard work. Actually, yes, hard work. So next slide. To addressing the nutrition problem, the government has established President Decree number 83 of 2017 to improve quality of nutrition, food and nutrition. So actually there are 5 pillars, and then translated to 5 pillars, and this activity what we should do. There are 6, and the important thing is promoting nutrition, promoting nutrition education, and community empowerment in food and nutrition. Next slide. This is also have already talked by Pak Lauren Haddad. This is our pillars that mentioned before. There are 4 pillars in this balanced nutrition, and then visualized by isi piringku, my plate, to make easier understand for the community. Then next slide. This is reduce waste. Actually, we have mind of 10 messages in balanced nutrition. So we can what you call not in Indonesia we call lapar mata. I don't know in English. Lapar mata is so it makes worse food, yeah. So so the problem is for that. Next slide. Actually, reducing food waste is investment. Investment. Reducing household expenditure is freeing up resources for value added. This is because of reducing freeing up resources for other household needs such as education and health. The result is addressing both health and environment problem. Raising awareness is the extent of their own waste can be a very effective through behavior change, good practices, and private investment. Next slide. That's all. Thank you very much. But this morning, actually, we have already talked about fish again. Fish is in fish protein high value set. This is produce the composition of fish, and we talk about how to potentially of protein to add it in our supplementation food with which is given by under 5 nutrition and pregnant woman. That's all. Okay. Thank you very much, Sausan.
Thank you very much, Bu Dhian, for your, I think it's very straightforward presentation. Bu Dhian, I have a question for you. You said that indeed the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the government's efforts on providing nutrition for the Indonesian people. And you say that reducing food waste is an investment. I'm just curious, is there any programs that that the government has already conducted regarding this issue?
Yeah, actually,
I mean, to reduce the food waste.
Okay, actually, when we talk about the balanced food, so we know what we eat is what we need. It's what we need, not just I said before, lapar mata. What we want, just order all of food, but just consume or eat just 1 or 2 food. So this is a waste food. So what we can do? What we can do now? We have already doing education to have a behavior change. and good practices like this is visualization of the pyramid of balanced food by isi piringku by my plate. This is easier to understand what we need for the dietary allowance, like that.
Thank you very much, Dhian. Unfortunately, the time is also up, and we have to move to the next speaker. We have a representative from Bappenas, Pak Nur, I believe. Hello, good afternoon, Pak Nur.
Good afternoon, Bu Sausan.
How are you, Pak?
Fine, thanks. Alhamdulillah. Okay.
Thank you, Pak. Pak Nur, sorry. So Pak Nur from the National Development Planning Agency is the Deputy Director of Livestock Development. And Bappenas is the National Coordinator of the Implementation of Sustainable Development Goals in Indonesia. To put into a global perspective, Indonesia is among countries that has pledged to comply with SDGs. And one of the SDGs target is to ensure sustainable food consumption and production, including halving food waste by 2030, as well as reducing food losses. So as a representative from the government, Pak Nur will deliver outlook over Indonesia's effort to reduce food waste, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. And Pak Nur, if you will, I know this is a sudden moment for you. I hope you can also address this question. Maybe we can discuss later after your presentation. So I'm quoting a report titled Growing Better, published by the Food and Land Use Coalition last year. The report stated that food loss and waste is not yet a leadership priority in many countries or companies. Policies, including fiscal incentives and penalties, are not strong enough to drive significant changes in behavior. My question is, how is the government of Indonesia place the food loss and waste issue in its policy agenda? You have 10 minutes for your session, Pak Nur. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Bu Sausan. Like you said before, that this is the like a sudden for me, but I think I will deliver materials from Bappenas. Unfortunately, Pak Arifin Rudiyanto cannot join with us because he accompanied Pak Menteri to prepare the food estate. And related to your question and also guideline from discussion, I will deliver some materials related to the national plan about how we can reduce the food loss and food waste. Next, please. I think I just complete information from the before speaker that during the COVID-19, we have some negative impact for food and agriculture. For food loss, we know that pandemic COVID-19, it will be a global food crisis according to the FOA prediction, and also WFP indicates that may see more than a quarter of a billion people suffering acute hunger by the end of the year. So this is the important thing that we must do some action, how we can reduce this negative impact from the COVID-19. And also a global report on food crisis 2020 estimates that about 135 million people in 55 countries currently face acute hunger as a result of conflict. So this is the affected by the climate change and also economic crisis. So this is the important information for us, especially for government, how we can prepare the action. And then how we can look the impact of the COVID-19 in food and agriculture. The next slide, please. In the left side, we can see, I'm sorry, the slide in still in Bahasa, but I think for GDP, for economic perspective, that we know that agricultural sector has contributing to the GDP about 15.46%. So you know that agriculture is the main sector how we can prepare the food for people in Indonesia. But unfortunately, in the micro economic, we know that agricultural sector has a huge share to the national GDP, but in the farmer level, for the I see in the information that the farmers' term of trade or NTP by only increase about a 0.56% month to month. So this is the, I think it's not really good for the farmer. And also the index only about 100.65. So this is indicates this it indicates that the farmer only just receive the small advantage or small profit for the agricultural activity. And then we see the next slide for food loss and waste in Indonesia. This is very sad information about that, about 300 kilograms of food per person each year. This is the very huge. So almost about 13 million tons of food waste every year. So it compare about 28 million people for food. So this is the huge number of people that we can feed from the 13 million tons. And then the next slide related to the question how we can prepare the national action. The first the important thing about the food waste is how we can increasing the availability, accessibility, and quality of food. And another side, we can reduce the food waste in the community level. So we have five main actions about the food national development plan. The first is how we can increase quality, safety, fortification, and biofortification of food consumption. And the second is how we can increase availability, price stability, and sustainability of food supply, including aquacultural food, like the before speaker said. And then how we can increase the productivity and sustainability agricultural human resources, including market access. So this is the third is a focus to the farmer. And the next is how we can increase productivity and sustainability of agricultural natural resources, including agriculture digitalization. So, and the last is how we can improve the national national food systems and food governance. Food governance. And the last strategy we can see in the slide, how we can manage the food waste. So this is the important thing that we must do in the next in the 5 years, especially in 2020, 2024, like mentioned in the national development plan for the 5 years in the future. And the second is we already established about the national food system. So in how we can reduce the negative impact from the pandemic COVID-19, we will strengthen the 5 pillars in the national food system. The first is how we can strengthen the sustainable domestic production. And the second is how we can develop local food industrialization. And the third is how we can stabilizing of food access. And fourth is how we can strengthen the farmer cooperation and food distribution. And the last is how we can strengthen the food assistance for vulnerable households. I think in these 5 pillars, we focus on how we can provide the adequate food for the people, and then in another side, how we can promote to the people how we can reduce the food waste. And the last is intervention for reducing food loss and waste. The government commits to reduce food loss and waste. The government pays attention to address the causes of food loss and waste. And we can see in this figure that the food loss and food waste can in this a part of the food system, from the production, processing and packaging, distribution, and also consumption. So in the production, processing and packaging, and also distribution, government focus how we can reduce the food loss, and the consumption side how we can reduce the food waste, especially in the cooking and eating process. So I think in the food loss, one of the important thing is how we can implement the good agricultural practices and good handling practices. So if we can by statistical data that, for example, for rice, there are some losses from the rice distribution. So this is the focus for the government. And in the consumption, in the people level, how we can reduce the food waste. And the last is how we can emphasize that reducing food loss and waste needs to be the multi-stakeholders businesses. So the government has recognized that many positive and real action done by society, students, business entities, research institutions, and local government on these issues. So I'm agree with the Ibu Sausan that mentioned that the food loss and food waste not only support by the government side, by the fiscal incentive or others, but we need a cooperation by all the stakeholders, especially from the community and also in the private sector. So I think in the about the follow-up, yes, We
Pak
have,
Nur, you
yes.
have 1 minute left.
Okay,
Could you
yes,
please
this is
speed up?
the last statement.
Thank you.
We from our side, I think we have the further activity. The first is how we can measure food loss and waste based on global methodology. So I think the some method we knowledge how we can do in the Indonesian condition. And the second, assessing the source of food waste and loss. The third is supporting the existing policies and programs, aiming at improving technology. And the fourth is relaxing procurement standards for perishable products. And the fifth is marketing restriction. I think this is how we can reduce the food loss and food waste in the distribution level, buying practices and responsible consumption. The seven is tax reduction, yes, incentive for food or surplus redistribution, supporting the existing food redistribution initiatives and circular economy approach. I think this all the material from us, and I hope we can discuss in the next session. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pak Nur. I think it's good to have some updates from the government about this issue. I'm sure that the audience are also curious about it. Pak Nur, you said that indeed the Indonesia the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the Indonesia's agriculture sector, but I believe this is, and you also said that this is a global crisis. This is an unprecedented crisis. Ini sesuatu yang kita kan belum pernah mengalami sebelumnya gitu ya Pak. So maybe the government or maybe Indonesia as a whole needs to have unprecedented actions. Is there any examples that the government trying to pursue on this this type of action? Maybe some innovations or breakthrough, or maybe we will just keep with what we have now. Thank you, Pak.
Okay, so COVID-19 is a very give us the huge numerous negative impact for us for our activity, but I think from the agricultural sector in Indonesia we have some lesson learned from the before, like how we can implement in the production level. For example, we have like a model about the how we can use the technology for the agricultural sector. So if we can use the technology, we can reduce the farmer activity in the field. So you know that the COVID-19 give us like a restriction for the activity, but if we can use the technology, we can solve this problem. And then the second, in the marketing or the market for the food, we have a lesson from the online marketing, and I think this is the important thing that we can develop this model in the future. Okay.
Thank you very much, Pak Nur. And also time is up. And once again, I will turn to our next speaker, Mr. Craig Hanson. Hi, Craig. How are you? Hi, Craig. Good afternoon.
Doing fine.
How are you?
Just fine, just fine.
I believe it's 4 a.m. in the US, right?
It is. It is.
Thank you for staying up for us. Much appreciated. So
My
my pleasure to introduce you, Craig is the Global Director for Food, Forest, and Water of World Resources Institute. He has co-developed several leading initiatives, including Food and Land Use Coalition. In this session, he will share with us his presentation, including what efforts in reducing food loss and waste that are already showing success around the globe. You have 10 minutes also. The floor is yours.
Great. I'm trying to fix my background here. There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. Craig Hanson here from the World Resources Institute. I would like to give you a bit of a background on what's happening around the world when it comes to reducing food loss and waste. So, as we've heard, this is a huge issue, and Suzanne, you can see my screen, is that correct? Food loss and waste is a big global issue, as if you've heard, and this is the world's first ever International Day of Food Loss and Waste. So it's very appropriate that we're having this event. 1/3 of all food is lost or wasted each year. The food loss and waste costs the global economy about $940 billion each year. It's also an environmental tragedy as well. 8% of all the food loss and waste, it contributes about 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, if food loss and waste were a country, it'd be the 3rd biggest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. And as you know, the distribution of food loss and waste varies around the planet. In some places, in very OECD economies, the majority of food loss and waste occurs close to the consumer, whereas in more developing regions, more of the food loss and waste occurs closer to the farmer, as you can see distributed here in this chart. But then again, across the board, anywhere from 25 to 40% of food ends up being lost or wasted between the farm and the fork, no matter where you are. And I believe that COVID-19 just exacerbates this issue. We've all seen headlines, right, from 6 months ago up to today about how COVID is leaving food in the field because farmers have no market or are unable to actually harvest the food, all the way to households no longer having jobs and therefore not being able to actually go to the food pantry to get food for themselves. So COVID is really exacerbating what was already a global crisis when it comes to food loss and waste. Now, reducing food loss and waste generates a number of benefits, right? It helps socially, it helps improve food security, and it can feed hungry people now. Reducing food loss and waste has economic benefits too. It increases the entire efficiency of the system, avoids unnecessary costs for households, and generates new revenue for farmers. And reducing food loss and waste provides environmental benefits. It helps to conserve and protect natural resources and is a means of helping to tackle climate change. Now, we did an analysis a couple of years ago of 700 companies, 1,200 business sites across 17 countries, and we found that those companies that actually take action to reduce food loss and waste, right, almost every single one of them had a positive return, and half of them had a return of greater than 14 to 1. So for every $1 invested in reducing food loss and waste, they made $14 or more. So there is an economic and financial case for reducing food loss and waste. And fortunately, the global community is on this issue, right? As mentioned earlier, there is a sustainable development goal on responsible consumption and production. The 3rd target within that goal is on food loss and waste, to cut in half the per capita food waste at retail and consumer levels and reduce food losses in production and supply chains. So this target of cutting in half food loss and waste is already there for the global community. Now, just last week, a coalition of executives called Champions 12.3, these are the champions of that SDG Target 12.3, made a call to action. They called on governments and companies to do 3 things. First of all, to follow the Target Measure Act approach. I'll go into that in a moment. Secondly, is to integrate food loss and waste reduction into the climate strategies of governments and of companies. And thirdly, is to pursue food loss and waste as part of COVID-19 responses. Now, let me talk a little bit about the Target Measure Act. It's pretty simple. It's a basic proven strategy for reducing food loss and waste that says, look, first set a target, adopt the Target 12.3 in your own country and company, because targets set ambition and ambition motivates action. Secondly, it says measure your food loss and waste and report on it publicly year in and year out, because we know that what gets measured gets managed. And finally, take action. Because at the end of the day, that's what ultimately matters, through policies, programs, innovations, and investments. Now, I want to give you a flavor of where the world is in terms of Target Measure Act. Let's look at governments for the moment. What you see on the screen are governments that have in place targets, explicit national targets that are aligned with SDG Target 12.3. Those in green are for both loss and waste. Those in yellow are just on the loss side. So about half of the world's population now is covered by a national target that is aligned with SDG Target 12.3. In terms of measure, not as many countries are measuring, but there are some. These are countries that have started the process of getting national inventories on food loss and waste within their country. It's an emerging movement here on measurement, but it's fundamental, as the previous speaker mentioned. And on acting, what you see here are countries that have put in place public-private partnerships to tackle food loss and waste. We see that public-private partnerships are very powerful means of a government to actually harness the power of its private sector to tackle this very important issue of food loss and waste. Now, in terms of countries, we had a publication we released last week that Deborah produces every year that looks at how is the world with regard to Target 12.3, what progress are we making? We're pleased to announce this year that for the first time you have a country that is more than halfway there towards achieving Target 12.3, and that is the United Kingdom. The UK just released numbers that they have reduced the per capita food loss and waste by 27% since 2007. So they're more than halfway there. This is from the farm gate all the way to the consumer plate. So what did they do? Well, as a country, they adopted the target. This is about the target, right? Secondly, they've been measuring their national food loss and waste every 2 or 3 years since 2007. So they've taken the measure element quite seriously. And in terms of ACT, they've done 3 big things. First, they launched a public-private partnership to engage the entire supply chain in the country on reducing food loss and waste within supply chains. Secondly, they launched a public campaign to actually engage consumers. It's called the Love Food, Hate Waste campaign. And thirdly, they worked to actually change food packaging design so that people could actually store food for longer. It would give tips to consumers on how to store food longer so that once people bought food, it would last longer in their homes and therefore reduce the food waste. The private sector has been taking action as well. Targets are being set by businesses. The Consumer Goods Forum, some of the world's 200 largest food companies have set a reduction to cut their food waste in half by 2030. Likewise, the Global Agribusiness Alliance, some of the largest food producers, have also set a target to reduce food losses within their own operations by 2030. So you're starting to see Target take off within the business community. And I'm pleased to say we also announced last week that among companies, we highlighted 3 that are actually more than halfway there to achieving the SDG target. What we see, for instance, is Tesco, a major food retailer. Tesco in the Central European office, Central Europe, has actually reduced its food waste by more than 50%. And what they did, they set targets. They've been measuring every year since 2013. They've improved their ordering and stocking to reduce in-store waste, and they've been sending surplus food to food banks and to animal feed. Campbell's, major soup manufacturing company, they've reduced their food loss and waste by 36% just since the year 2017. And again, they set a target, right? They got the whole organization rallying around this issue. They measure, they publicly report their food loss waste inventory. They repurpose the wasted food to make new items, like selling bread to make breadcrumbs or using their fruit shavings to make soups. And whatever scraps and discards they have, they divert to animal feed. Like finally, Arla, Scandinavia's largest dairy company, has reduced its food loss and waste by 27%. Again, they set a target. They've been measuring publicly since 2015. They developed an internal team to identify the hotspots of food loss and waste, and they created an online marketplace for selling products that are near expiry date, right, at discount, therefore getting it off the shelf and getting it into the hands of consumers. Likewise, Olam, major food producer on the planet, they've seen a 36% reduction in rice losses in the Cameroon. So what do? What they found, they did an inventory, they did an analysis, they found out that the storage at port was a big problem, with bags breaking and tearing, etc. So they did a big push to actually work with their handlers to more safely handle the rice, rebag torn bags as soon as possible, and also do surprise audits of operation managers to make sure that they were handling the rice packaging, the rice bags as safely and securely as possible. This past week, we launched an initiative called 10 by 20 by 30, which takes those leaders in retail who then turn around and engage their suppliers on the Target Measure Act approach. And this moves the movement of Target Measure Act upstream. So we have about 10 of the world's food largest retailers that each now are engaging 20 of their top suppliers. And here you see we have now more than 200 suppliers around the world that are actually now following the Target Measure Act approach across the planet. Now, finally, there are tools available for governments and for companies to actually support here. First, there's measurement and accounting standards that have been made to actually help companies and governments measure their food loss and waste. Likewise, there's a lot of guidance out there about what it takes to actually reduce your food loss and waste. The world knows, companies know, governments know, they have experience now what it takes. And we've documented that. Here we see examples of various to-dos, very no-regret strategies for reducing food losses for farmers, for fishers, likewise for reducing food waste for households and restaurants, and anywhere you are on the food supply chain. So I want to close by saying now is the time to really take food loss and waste seriously. It can be a response to COVID, it can be a response to climate change, and fundamentally, it's just good for the environment, good for business, and good for our country if you follow the Target Measure Act approach. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg. It's a very insightful presentation. Thank you. Greg, I saw from the your presentation that I think Indonesia still has white colors in terms of target and measurement, right? But already has a yellow color for the public-private partnership. So I think if I'm not mistaken, so if I try to interpret, Indonesia has already some efforts, collaborative efforts between government and the private sector, but we still don't have yet the clear target and how we measure our target, right?
Correct. There is a budding movement amongst companies in Indonesia to come together. They recognize the issue. They want to follow the Target Measure Act approach. But one of the first things to be done is to work on measurement, both at the corporate level, and a number of companies are starting to measure their food loss and waste at the corporate level. But then ultimately, we need to get measurement at the national level. So A, you can understand what your baseline is, but then B, be able to measure progress, identify where the hot spots are, because you can't do everything everywhere all the time, right? And then C, you want to be able to then measure your progress over time.
Okay, thank you. I actually have one more question. We still have 1 minute left.
Sure.
So you also you mentioned earlier about the collaborative measures. I personally think that food loss and waste is a complex problem that we all of us are guilty in. So as an individual with a little knowledge on how food system works, can you please share what, as an individual, how we can contribute to the food loss waste effort reduction?
Yeah, that's a great question. As an individual consumer, I think the first thing one can do is essentially plan your meals. One thing we've seen in the United Kingdom and other countries that are making progress is that it's a big push to get consumers to make basically a shopping list. Before you go out and get your food, make a list. Because just going through the planning helps match what eventually you're going to eat versus what you buy. Because food waste in the household is fundamentally a problem of people buying more than they actually end up consuming. And so the more you can match demand and supply, you'll have less food waste. And it all starts with planning, right? Know exactly what you want to get and nothing more for when you go to the store. Very simple tip. Too few people do it, but there's no excuse not to do it.
Thank you very much for your answer. So for the audience, I think you have to do this suggestion. First, make your shopping list from now on. I think we have to go to the next speaker. We have learned a lot from the previous speaker, from the awareness, the environmental, the nutrition issues, but we haven't discussed yet about the economic side. But this is also a relevant perspective to be included into the discussion. So our last speaker fits the topic very well. Welcome, Bu Felia. Good afternoon, Bu. Bu Felia Salim.
Oh, hi. Aduh, kok yang ini salah?
Bu Felia Salim is a finance and banking expert, an ambassador of Foodland and Youth Coalition, and GAIN board member. She has spent more than 30 years in finance and banking sector.
Okay.
Yeah. How are you, Bu?
Fine, thank you. Could you? I'm well, thank you. Can you give me a minute?
Okay.
I'm just following all the presentations so that I just avoid to repeat some of the presentations. So I want to focus on the transforming food systems and the role of finance in pushing for the changes. Yes.
Yes, please, Bu, because
yeah.
I think you're still preparing it, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I think I better just manage it myself. Yes.
Yeah, because
yes.
actually food is one of the biggest thing that we spend our money on.
Oh, yeah.
But
okay. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So I think I'll just manage it myself. So we can skip on some of the slides that's already been covered by previous speakers, which is excellent for me because I only have 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you to Jakarta Post for hosting this very important, seminar. And it's very timely. It's not only because of COVID, but, we've had problems with NCDs, health issues, and also efficiency in the economy. So why don't we address those two together? That's why. So this is my proposed slides. Just very quickly, I'd like to point out about the food loss that there are opportunity lost or hidden costs because of the, we have discussed already how much is the food losses, but this is the amount of the hidden costs with the inefficiency in the food and land use in the agro-related industries. Yeah, about 62.7 billion. And I think the value should be higher if we incorporate the logistics and beyond. So basically, in terms of health, it's about 155, the environment, 137, and rural welfare, 11 billion, conflicts, 2 billion. So these are the hidden costs by subcategory. And this is the interventions that we need to look into for better future scenario and for immediate action, right? It's in the space of nutritious food, and we've covered a lot about that and how we should transition, how about diets, etc. And the nature-based solution, we discussed that most of it is the production processes that needs to be improved, for example, and then have the wider choice, expanding consumer choices, accelerating diversification, and opportunity, which with the digitization, somebody already mentioned that, but what's important in digitization is the more transparent price formation, so as to create the fair price in regards to the distribution and market. So these are the 10 critical transitions to be made within the existing economic paradigm, right? So, but let's look at about the reducing the food and loss and waste, because this is the focus of our discussion today. I think we've covered this. The previous speaker from Bappenas already mentioned that the Indonesia food and loss and waste is 300 kg. And of course, from the health ministry already touched on the health issues. So this was also covered. If you look at it, what are the improvement, transformation that needs to take place is in the area of production, handling of storage, and of course also processing. But production and handling of storage is really two of the major efficiency space that the structures of the industries needs to be addressed. So just as a case study, it was already also touched upon, and food loss and waste to be within the palm oil or within the dairy or rice for that matter. Just these three sectors can reduce 1.6% emissions decrease. And that equals to, for example, 96% of Jakarta's 5.3 million cars off the road. But how realistic is that? It's not realistic. And the more realistic approach if we can tackle all these three agro-based industries. So some of best practices, I think, Greg, you also mentioned already Tesco. That is quite inspiring because we have a huge network of Indomarts and Alphamarts that they can, we can study from Tesco how to improve our retail shops. That is perhaps one of the biggest sector that is in the whole of archipelago, because we are a consumption-driven society, and retail shops really employs a lot of people. So this is a good case study to learn from. And there are several other examples. Nestle from Olan Gabon, and this is just to cite a few. In Indonesia, that's already started, right? Kurangi sampah plastic, waste management. There's several good examples that has started. The city government initiatives on tackling food waste in restaurants and hotels by proposing composting food waste, also hotel, banking sector, food and beverage companies. I think this has been raised by previous speakers, and food banking and a lot of social entrepreneurs that are getting financing from impact investors. And I'd like to just show this slide. I'm not going to go deep into the circular economy, but I am really talking about the food systems transformation. We could tackle it based on the existing conventional paradigm and just enhance fixing it, within the same paradigm. But we could also look at the circular economy, in the food systems transformation. So, closing the loop in supply chain from agricultural production to post-harvest, processing, manufacturing, retail, wholesale, consumption, and service. And all of these, each processes can have its circular activities by always looking at prevention and how to reuse and recycling, recovery. All of this should be a campaign, and indirectly what we are talking here actually is really about the circular economy, right? So this is the core of my presentation. Is really the role of finance in becoming a catalyst for change, right? And like I said, we could handle blended finance at the production side by incentivizing good agricultural practices. good farming practices, for example, using soil biology as opposed to soil chemistry in fertilizer, for example, assisting farmers to have better farming practices, for example. Most of the things that can be proposed is not really rocket science, but really just with a little bit of hand-holding, a bit of education and commitment by the large companies, by the big consumer groups, companies, and trickle down all the way to the last guy, the farmer in the Indonesian village, by providing the education and awareness on how to use soil biology, for example, for fertilizer, and using better seeds, for example, in palm oil sector, and for example, for the rice farmers, how to process it, more effectively, and on and on and on. And for the whole process of the value chain, it can be addressed. Yeah. And also on the consumption side, of course, how to incentivize, for example, like the Tesco example, or the campaigning for the consumers, for example. So many things can be addressed, and using the blended finance. So so let me go to this slide first. So the blended finance is developed as a special purpose built capital. It's a mixture of long-term soft loan or development funds with commercial funds, so as to support a competitive rate. Usually long-term soft loan is the rate is softer and it's longer, whereas commercial funds is normally more expensive and shorter term. But if you blend it, then overall it's a much cheaper rate. So that incentivizes companies to want to access blended finance. So what are the things that we want to measure? Obviously, we measure whatever it is that we want to intervene, whatever we want to transform within that food systems transformation. So, of course, we need to look at the return on investment and the return on environment, biodiversity, or what have you. You can decide on what it is that you want to measure. But obviously, for this purpose, we want to see the reduction of the food loss and waste. And of course, this return on social impact should also always be incorporated. So what is the difference between a conventional banking and a blended finance, right? What it does, it absorbs the initial high risks, the planning, feasibility, community engagement. You need to get the farmers prepared, educating. You won't see your average banker being able to do all this. It's the transaction cost is too high. And they will not have the proper capability in doing so. So this is normally absorbed by the development funds aspect. It could also be a TA facility to achieve the SDG standards, right? So essentially, the commercial funding sources is to be attracted to participate in this blended finance, right? So this is the idea of the blended finance. This is a catalyst, not only to change the food systems transformation, but also a catalyst to get the financial sector to participate in this process, right? So overall, it is to basically the theories of change. We identify the five distinct pathways is to compensate the mainstream financial institutions for some of the additional perceived risk, the upfront risk of financing sustainable production and the improvement of smallholder yields. Yeah. So this should lead to increased capital inflows from other players for responsible producers, thereby reducing the food loss and waste, reduce deforestation, increase the social impact, and whatever else you want to agree with the companies what we want to achieve jointly. So to compensate commodity producers, for example, for some of the opportunity costs, the hidden costs, which is the high transaction costs in setting up this transaction, because this really takes quite a bit of time, because we are still at the very early stages of this blended finance. Also at the very early stages in a lot of the impact investment community, right? So, so this is it. Now, number 3, to encourage the intensification of agricultural production, you know, and then to provide risk capital, number 4, to new commodity types and production systems, and of course to reinforce public policy signals and encourage improved regulation by providing this finance. So these are the 5 theories of change that can derive from this initiative. So I'm just going to quick snapshots here. We have, this happens to be N-Green, sustainable finance. It's already financed in one of the palm oil, for example. It's improving the yields of the farmers, therefore improving.
Sorry, Bu Felia, you have 1 minute left.
Yes, this is my second last. And this is the example for the livestock in Roncador, Brazil. So basically the key takeaway, so blended finance is a catalyst for food systems change. And the sources of funding required consists of the development funds, which includes the technical assistance fund. And hopefully we can attract commercial funds, right? And in Indonesia, we see the potential for the commercial funds coming from the state-owned banks that have a development agenda, but also sourcing the large impact investment community. I think it's about like 500 billion and growing. Thank you. I'll stop right there.
Thank you very much, Bu. Bu Felia, I think you mentioned a bit about this. So you said that role of finance become catalyst of change. We need to assist the farmers to have better practices. I assume this more sustainable practices. It is not a rocket science, but we need commitment by everyone, large companies, big consumer groups. And I'd like to know your thoughts. How is Indonesia progress on implementing this financial side?
Yeah, I must say there's been a lot of attempts by OJK, the Financial Services Authority. It has already come out with POJK number 51, regulation, the FSA regulation 51 for sustainable finance. What it doesn't have is maybe how to measure the standardization, right? I'm less concerned about the standardization, but in actually identifying what systems transformation that we want to have. Now, this is a good forum because we are talking about specifically food loss and waste, or specifically about, you know, we've identified several like rice, palm oil, and what have you. We can choose from different examples. We can also look at the retailers, you know, look at the whole ecosystem from production, processing to logistics, to retail, to the consumer, the whole value chain. Each stepping stone, there are, this is where we can intervene at each process of the value chain. So this should be then designed into what is it that we want to transform, right? And of course, conventional banking doesn't have that know-how, but this is where we need to start talking with the authorities and with the banking community. Especially we can prioritize with the state-owned banks because they do have a development agenda, right? We can go sector by sector, right? You can go to automotive, for example. It's a move towards electric vehicle. You know, there's so many things. That's on the environmental space. But on the, if we want to address health issues, so what is it that we want to measure, that we want to transform? So we see now it is at an early stage. There's already like the first initiator, there's few banks that is doing piloting with the Financial Services Authority, but also globally, there are blended finance initiatives that is springing up, and maybe Lawrence can also explain that. GAIN is also preparing the nutritious financing food facilities. It's also a blended approach with developmental aspect, with systems change transformation. There's N Green, who's addressing specifically on return on environment and return on social impact, without losing sight of it has to be profitable, right? And if this, we can have more good examples, we can bring in this whole impact investment community into this space. We can bring the whole commercial banking into this space. As you know, the likes of HSBC, DBS, Deutsche, they all have their sustainability agenda. Also now, people like BlackRock, the chairman of BlackRock is already saying it's inevitable. We need to put the sustainability agenda into our, the way we assess finance, right? So it is early stage, but we really need to address it. And what I'm happy to see the presentation from Bapak dari Bappenas, Pak Nur, dan Ibu dari from the Ministry of Health. I mean, all the building blocks, what we need to do is already clear. Now how to link finance in order to contribute to pushing the systems transformation. So the opportunity is right there for us to continue the process.
Thank you very much, Bu Felia. It's very insightful opinion. And for attendees, if you have questions to be addressed to a certain panelist, you can write the question on the chat box, and please write the name of the speakers. And I think all the speakers have rounded up for their presentation. I wish I have more time to dig deeper about this issue with the panelists, but I think I've seen that a lot of attendees also want to join in the discussion. So my colleague Mbak Muthi will assist on the next Q&A session. I'll hand it over to our MC. For speakers, questions are coming your way, so get ready for that. Mbak Muthi, please, over to you.
Thank you, Sausan. Okay, thank you to our speakers for sharing your valuable insights. And thank you for our audience for staying with us and asking a lot of interesting questions. We have looked through the questions, and here are some questions that we have. Okay, first question goes to Dr. Lawrence. We are recommended to consume fish and seafood to complete our nutrition intake. However, I have a concern on consuming fish because of microplastic and other pollutants that are consumed by fish and other aquatic animals. What is your insight on food safety?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't have a good answer for you. That's a rapid answer. Food safety is going to become an increasingly important issue for Indonesia as food value chains lengthen, as the distance between the farm and the fork grows. You know, in more traditional food systems, say Indonesia 50 years ago, much more of what is consumed was produced on your doorstep. Now, as food value chains lengthen, there's much more opportunity for good nutrition to come in, but also a lot more opportunity for bad nutrition to come in and pollutants to enter the value chain. So food safety regulations need to be strengthened in every country on the planet, and that's a combination of regulation and positive incentives. I think consumers are going to become increasingly aware of the what in English we call the provenance of food, where it comes from, how it's produced, not just what the price is and how it tastes. That's really important, and its convenience, but where is it coming from? Is there a sticker on the food that says this food was produced ethically, it was produced sustainably, it was produced responsibly, and it produced safely? So I think all of those things are going to become really, really important. If I may just quickly talk about the nutritious food financing facility, is that okay, Muthi? Just 2 seconds on that, because that's
I think we have time for that.
Felia mentioned that, and it's a very important pilot. It's a $60 million pilot, which basically says, can we get private investors through blended finance, so a little bit of finance, but a lot of private finance? can we get private investors to invest in companies that are improving nutrition outcomes, as well as being commercially viable and commercially investable? And one of the 4 outcomes that GAIN and Incofin, who's our fund manager partner, one of the 4 outcomes that we are looking for from small and medium enterprises is, is their work and are they reducing food loss and food waste? So that's an example of the kind of incentive that you need to give to businesses so that they improve, and food safety is another one of the outcomes. How can you incentivize businesses to do even more? If businesses don't do this, we're not going to succeed. So we have to figure out, how do we incentivize businesses? Consumers can do it, civil society can do it, government can do it, and investors can do it. And all 4 of those need to come together to incentivize businesses to do more on reducing food loss and food waste. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Haddad, for your recommendation. Okay, the next question is for Ibu Dhian. This question is from a waste management startup, eWaste, W-A-Z-T-E. It's from Gamal Nasser. So how does the government help assist startups that want to contribute in providing solutions to reduce food waste? Right now, we are collecting food waste and redirecting them to businesses who can reproduce them into added value or refined products. Ibu Dhian? Okay, so I understand that Ibu Hera is filling up for Ibu Dhian.
Yeah.
Ibu Hera, can you answer the question?
You can repeat.
Okay. This question is from a waste management startup, eWaste, from Bapak Gamal Nasser. So how does the government help assist startups that want to contribute in providing solutions to reduce food waste? Right now, we are collecting food waste and redirecting them to businesses who can reproduce them into added value or refined products.
Sorry, the question is not clear, but I will type my my answer. Okay.
Okay. Okay, Ibu Hera.
Because the connectivity is not stable, I think. Or all of you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. We can hear you. So basically, okay. Maybe I will just move on to the next question from Pak Nur to Pak Nur. This question is for Pak Nur. Okay, Pak Nur, are you ready for the question?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Pak Nur. So this is a question from MC Reynolds II Bandar Lipe. Has the government already instituted a circular economy in the food system to ensure that Indonesian people have access to safe and nutritious food while minimizing food losses and wastage?
Okay, thank you very much. This is a very good question. I think we, from the government side, we try to introduce some activities how we can reduce the food and food loss and also food waste in the production, distribution, and also consumption side. We know that some activities that support the huge of the food losses, for example, because there are many activities that the farmer not do the good agricultural practices. So how we can improve the implementation of the good agricultural practices in the farmer level, and then in the distribution also how we can improve the infrastructure condition And last, in the consumption side, how we can improve the socialization campaign to the community, how we can reduce the food waste. Okay.
Okay, is that all, Pak?
Yes. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Pak Nur. Okay, the next question is for Mr. Hanson. Thank you for still staying with us. I believe it's very late there, early morning actually. So there's a question for Mr. Hanson. There is some information about food waste tax that is implemented for food service sector. So the question is, what do you all think about this? Is there a possibility food waste tax become one of solutions to solve food waste in the future?
Great, good question. I think we've seen in a number of countries the impact of putting a price on food waste. Whether you see it in a restaurant, so in Sweden, there are some restaurants where you go to a buffet and you get your food. And what they do is they actually charge you first for your food, but then also when you leave, if there's food left over on your plate, you get charged again. And that sends a signal to consumers to just buy what they need. They can always go back and get more if you want to, and eat what you take, right? And so that's an example where it's not a government tax, but it's actually a fee imposed by the restaurant to do this. So that's an example that we've seen that actually has reduced the amount of food waste by the consumers. In some countries, you do have a tax on garbage and on organics in particular to try to help reduce the amount of organics, which would be mostly by food, that people dispose of. What we've seen there is it does encourage people to then compost what they don't eat. Could end up going into compost to make soil for their garden. It doesn't necessarily reduce the food waste. You can still waste your food, but then you go to compost, you avoid the tax. In other places, it actually helps focus the mind that you're going to pay a fee for not eating everything that you buy. And so where you can get a price signal into the system typically helps. You have to think through the implications of it, but pricing does help.
All right, so yeah, pricing does help, but most of the time, the regulation to pay for what you don't eat is imposed by restaurants. Do you recommend that it should be also regulated by the government?
It's tricky, right? I think it depends upon. I mean, this works in a restaurant that's a buffet, right? Because then you have to go back and actually, when you leave, and you can measure what's on the plate. We haven't yet seen it in a restaurant that's a sit-down a la carte where it's piece by piece. So we haven't seen that approach there. I do think thinking about the appropriate price signal to send into the marketplace is something that countries should look at. Maybe a flat tax isn't the approach everywhere, but still thinking through how one prices waste, I would argue in general does help. At least start to focus the mind on reducing the waste.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hanson. All right, so next question we have for Ibu Felia. So Ibu, how far has the financial industry in Indonesia adopted and applied blended finance practice? How far and what is the blueprint?
Yeah, actually, I just finished typing the answer. Like I said, you know, the Financial Services Authority has come up with the regulation number 51, which stipulates that all banks have to incorporate sustainability into their business, into the corporate plan of each bank, which means the next step is how the banks ought to be pushing their clients, meaning the supply side, the sustainability standards. I think where the trick is, this is where the conventional bankers are not equipped, right? The whole training on sustainability is just like an add-on. It's not yet mainstream. So, but at least there is a plan. There is a push by the Financial Services Authority for banks to get prepared, right? So this is where how blended finance can help to speed up that process, because it's really not only from the financial sector, but it's really the supply side. It's the companies, the corporations that needs to push systems transformation. So think circular economy, right? And intermediaries such as the financial sector can help push that process. So in terms of blueprint, yes, blueprint is one thing. There's so many blueprints, but there's a roadmap by such and such time. Because why the Financial Services Authority came up with this, it's also to align with the whole national commitment for reducing, greenhouse gases, right? It's aligned with that, but the actual hurdle is really the heavy lifting upfront, which is a lot of the education, a lot of the technical assistance work that puts in place, because it's really working on the ground with the farmers, with the communities, right? When it comes to environment, how you do not deforest, but so what is the compensation for the communities? There's so many angles. It's not one size fits all. It really depends on sector by sector, right? It's so with more perhaps blended finance, which brings in the technical assistance. I think we can speed up that process. But we have everybody has this agenda looking at 2030 and 2050, right? So so there's your roadmap. And Bappenas's presentation, Minister of Health, it's already the blueprint, basically the building blocks that needs to be transformed. So I'm glad we have that. Hopefully we can link this discussion with more of the financial intermediaries. Yeah, silakan.
Okay, Bu. Yeah, we hope for the best. Okay, it seems like Sausan, our moderator, has a question for Ibu Felia. Please proceed, Sausan.
Hello, Bu Felia. Bu Felia, I have a question. Probably it is best to make an illustration. So there are two farmers who plant the same crops, and then they share the same portion of food losses. The first farmer decided to invest on more sustainable practices. So this farmer needs to have a higher selling price. But the problem is people keep buying the cheaper one, the tastier one. So in short, the market does not recognize sustainable standards. So my question is, how can we create the market that recognize sustainable standards so that the producers or maybe stakeholders at the upstream level triggered to implement such practices? Because people buying sustainable products I think it's only a niche in the community. Thank you.
Well, it seems like a niche right now, right? I mean, you have all these organic stores, and only the middle upper income segment that goes to shop for those. They're willing to pay for it. So that's why because it's still a scarce product. That's why it's high. But when we have traction, when it's becoming mainstream, that's why it has to be a fundamental structural food systems change. That's why it takes a while. Therefore, if you're using commercial lending, of course it's very expensive. You need cheaper funding in order to be able to reduce. There's an additional TA. If you think about it, step back a little bit. The commercial funds today is only financing that which is, the conventional process. my slide showed that actually there's a hidden cost. Remember the value was like 240 something, and actually the cost was 300. So somebody else is paying for it, right? So it's a wrong economic structure. So anyway, I don't want to get into that, but there's there's an economic paradigm that needs to be fixed, you know. But let's start with the building blocks. You know, the whole pricing structure is incorrect today. That's why fixing that, it needs to have the public funds to support that change. Eventually, with more critical mass, hopefully that the pricing will become better. But again, you know, right now we just have to rely on the large consumer groups, right? They have to want it, right? They have to want to change plastic, the use of plastic, for example. You know, they have the way for the systems transformation. I don't think government alone can do it. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sausan?
Yes. Okay. Yes, I agree that this is not, we cannot only rely on the government. This is a work for all of us to do. So yeah, I think if we can help, then we all have to help. So we have one more question for all panelists. The question is from Bapak Joni Chandra. Modern urban food systems generally source food products from large corporate food producers and manufacturers through integrated cold chains, state-of-the-art logistics, and embedded quality assurance systems. In urban areas, food products are distributed to consumers through a variety of retail outlets, including convenience stores, supermarkets, hypermarkets, and e-commerce, and food service outlets, including national and multinational fast food chains. The question is how can the government manage it? By regulation, standardization, and how the private sectors could adopt and collaborate with the SMEs.
I'm happy to have a first go at this, Muthi. You know, in some countries, governments have facilitated, and it really goes back to one of Craig's points about private-public partnerships. Some governments, and in the UK they've done this, have set up a facility whereby governments, big businesses and smaller businesses collaborate together. Governments serve as a bridge between the big businesses and the smaller businesses. The smaller businesses find it very hard to do a lot of this work around food loss, food waste. It's expensive. Even though the returns are very high, the initial investment is also quite daunting. So the big businesses provide support to the smaller businesses. It's good for the big, and government acts as a broker between the two. And in that way, the government begins to communicate what it is demanding from business, and business begins to understand what government is trying to do. And it's good for the small businesses because obviously they get technical support from the big businesses on how to meet regulations, how to meet standards, how to do testing, how to do quality assurance, and so on. The big businesses find it to be a good thing because they begin to build trust in markets that perhaps it's not economical for them to penetrate, but they begin to build trust with their potential suppliers. They begin to build trust with government, and they begin to understand markets that are too low income for them to engage in at the moment, but in 5 to 10 years may become higher income, so that they can do it, and they can do it in a responsible way. So that's one example of what governments can do, is bridge the big businesses and the small businesses in a sort of a tripartite model.
Yeah, I'd like to build on that if I could. I agree. If there's one thing we've seen driving progress in countries, it's public-private partnerships on food loss and waste. The United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Denmark, those are 3 countries. Yes, they're all OECD, but those 3 probably have made the most progress to date on tackling food loss and waste. And a unifying factor there is they all have established public-private partnerships. And as Lawrence mentioned, you know, government is a bridge. There are certain things governments can do to help address this issue, but a lot of food is touched by private sector hands. The big companies all the way to the small companies. And that's why, you know, we launched last week this 10 by 20 by 30. You have the big companies like Walmart, you know, Tesco and others who themselves are tackling food loss and waste, but then they're also reaching upstream to the mid-sized and the small-sized company and working with them to tackle it as well, to get a whole value chain approach. And you even have, you know, we're being supported by the Walmart Foundation, right, to help with that engagement with the suppliers. I think that's how you start getting movement in the system, is that whole supply chain approach.
And if I may add, jump in, you know, Indonesian SMEs, right? It's a largely food and beverage, you know, with a small micro businesses. It's all in the food and agro business, and they need support, right? And there's a lot of demand to import Indonesian food producers, but none of them can export to these countries because of the standard certification, you know, quality. And this needs support, for example. Yeah, it's not just the large groups, but the whole, you know, also the small businesses.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Bu Felia, for the insight. All right. So I think we're about to wrap up. This is a very wonderful discussion about food loss and waste, and I would like to. There's this one there's a comment from one of our audiences. Her name is Andari Kristanto. So she would like to thank Mr. Craig Hanson from WRI. Because of your web, then we started doing research on food waste last year at University of Indonesia. And hopefully we have a good baseline data to do the action to reduce it. So kudos to you. Okay. Yeah, so thank you again. Thank you very much for all speakers and participants for the delightful discussions today in JakPost Up Close. I apologize if I failed to deliver all of your questions to the panelists given the limited time that we had. So I'd like to inform you that the Jakarta Post will introduce a new webinar program, JakPost Spotlight. JakPost Spotlight is a Jakarta Post new webinar series following the success of the JakPost Up Close webinar program. JakPost Spotlight aims to discuss topics relevant to institutions seeking to engage with the public. And the first episode of JakPost Spotlight will be held on Thursday, October 1st, with the theme Mahatma Gandhi, Satyagraha, and the Path to World Peace. This theme coincides with International Day of Nonviolence on October 2nd. So make sure you register. Stay tuned to our website, thejakartapost.com, for more information, or if you want to get access to a lot of insightful stories and want the Jakarta Post to contribute more to public discourse, subscribe today on the jakartapost.com packages. Don't forget to follow our social media, the Jakarta Post on Facebook, at JakPost on Twitter, and at JakPost Images on Instagram to get the latest updates. Before I close today's webinar, I'd like to invite all the speakers to take pictures so that we will remember our moments together today. I'll count to 3, and then we're ready to go. Okay, 1, 2, 3. All right. Okay, thank you. Once again, thank you very much. Thank you very much to all speakers and audience for staying with us. Have a great day. Stay safe and stay well. See you soon on the next webinar.
Thank you very much.
Thank
to
you.
our
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Teman.
Bapak Ibu.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
See you soon,
you.
Lawrence.
See you, Felia. See you, Craig. See you, everyone.
Talk to you, Craig.
Thank you all.
See you.
Well done. Thank you, Jakarta Post. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dhian.
Thank you so much. 3, 2, 1.